Welcome to Uncommon Sense, where we do our best to make it common again. I'm your host, Adrian Ahlquist, and today I'm joined by, maybe for some of you, a familiar voice, Nancy Brown. How are you, Nancy?
Hello, Adrian. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Nancy was a previous host of Uncommon Sense and actually a host for a very long time. How long did you host it?
I believe 10 years.
Wow. Well, there you go. I've been hosting it for less than a year. So I'm in the midst of giants now.
Well, I never did the video part of it, so it was a little easier.
So we're really grateful for Nancy for doing that because you just did it out of the kindness of your heart. And
Yep.
And that's just a really long time. So we wanted to talk about your experience with hosting the podcast, but Nancy is also involved with the society in a number of other ways. Nancy also wrote a book called The Woman Who Is Chesterton, which I really like that title. That's one of my favorite titles, I think, of ours, because you think, well, what do you mean, the woman who is Chesterton? Oh, there it is. Because Chesterton's always associated with the guy, but we never think about his wife, Frances Chesterton, and so it's a love story, but it's also a detective story, and it's a true story, and it's told the first time in this book because Nancy. We say a detective story because Nancy did all this work uncovering Frances's story, and so I really encourage you to pick it up. You can pick it up at our shop, chesterton.org/shop, and find the book there, The Woman Who Is Chesterton. So that's one way Nancy's involved. But then right now, she's also the project manager for Chesterton Cor Jesu, which is our online school. A couple weeks ago on this podcast, I interviewed Andrew Youngblood, who is the headmaster of Chesterton Cor Jesu. And now we can talk to Nancy, who deals with all of the background stuff. So I want to talk about that as well. So first off, let's talk about your experience hosting the podcast. How did you end up doing it? How did it start? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, everyone listens to podcasts now, but back then, which was about, I think, 2009, podcasts were just like new and great. And everyone was like, oh, you should do this. And there was this priest, Father Roderick, I don't know if you're familiar with SQPN. He used to host this whole network, and he was into Star Wars and Harry Potter and all kinds of stuff. And so he's really into talking about our current culture, but on podcasts. And I used to listen to him. And one time he was just like, everyone should start a podcast. And I was like, yeah, we should have one too here at the Chesterton Society. I thought it would be another way of reaching out, finding people that maybe aren't normally within our society, but who might like to listen to podcasts. And so I think I just asked your dad one time, could I start a podcast? And he was like, sure.
That's very innovative then. It was very innovative for the time, I hear.
Yes.
That's great. And he just said, yeah, and you started doing it.
Yeah. And I didn't know what I was doing. I really, I started from scratch. And
wow.
I had a Macintosh computer. It had GarageBand on it. People said you could do podcasts with GarageBand. So I just taught myself how to do it.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Because before me, there was Matt, who was the host between you and me. And he had a nice rig up. And so it was very easy for me to step in, at least tech wise. So that's very impressive. I didn't know that. So did you, what was your general schedule or topics? What did you do for the 10 years mostly?
Well, see, that was the glory of being a volunteer. I didn't have to have a schedule. and anytime I tried to have a schedule, it never worked out. I was always doing it on the side. And my husband and I travel a lot. So anytime we traveled, it would interfere with a regular schedule. So I just put them out whenever I had a topic that I was interested in, or I found a guest to speak, or someone suggested, why don't you talk about this? And so that's just organically how it happened. And the listeners, just kind of organically grew too. From very, very few in the beginning. But there are, then like even years later, people would discover the podcast, even as they do now. And they'd go, oh, there's 100 more episodes. Let me start from the beginning and listen to all of those. And
that's great.
Most of those are still relevant, because they're timeless. Chesterton is timeless. You can talk about him, anytime.
Right. That's the beauty of Chesterton. I mean, and in fact, you can listen to Chesterton and it because he's so prophetic, it applies to now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. I hope our listeners go back and listen to Nancy's podcast. That would be great. That would help us out. I'm just so thankful for you developing this podcast, so I can take over.
Sure.
Yeah, cool. Is there anything else you wanted to say about your experience hosting the podcast?
No, it was wonderful. I loved it. We eventually had regular listeners, and people would call in, let me know, and not call in, but, email me and say, oh, this was a great topic. Why don't you talk about that? And that always inspired me to do the next one. So it was always great. So if you're listening and you've always listened to me, thank you. And keep listening to Adrian, because he's got a lot of great topics coming up, and he has a lot of great topics already. And you can also watch them, which is another great feature.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, if you're ever encouraged to see us on YouTube, because we're able to put links in the description for all these stuff. I'll put links for Nancy's book and Chesterton Cor Jesu. But yeah, so let's talk about your book, The Woman Who Is Chesterton. What was your experience trying to find information on Frances? Because my understanding is that there wasn't a lot to go off of before you wrote the book, or at least it was scattered information, right?
That is correct, Adrian. As a matter of fact, there was no Wikipedia page on Frances Chesterton. But if you look now, there is a Wikipedia page on Frances Chesterton, and most of the references are from The Woman Who Is Chesterton. So I don't know. Really, I don't know who put that together, but thanks be to God, there's more information now than ever there was before. But I wanted to tell you a little story about the name, the title, since you mentioned that. You enjoyed the title. So many years ago, I started getting interested in Frances, and I was really starting to research her life. And I told your dad, hey, I'd really like to give a talk at one of the conferences on Frances Chesterton. And he thought that was a great idea. And we were kind of batting around titles for my talk. And, Chesterton has The Man Who Was Thursday, and someone wrote a book called The Man Who Was Chesterton. And so he thought a great title would be The Woman Who Is Chesterton. So we used that title. And when I walked into, no one knew who I was, and they didn't know exactly. And there were no descriptions for this conference. It was just the title. So there were a few people who told me afterwards, they were in the audience, that they were wondering if I was going to talk about the feminine side.
I can see that. That's so funny. That's so awesome. Oh my God.
Yeah. So they were pleasantly surprised when I talked about his wife.
The actual Woman Who is Chesterton.
Exactly.
That's really good. So my dad came up with it. Okay.
Yeah, he was the one who suggested. I'm pretty sure that's my memory's not perfect, but I think it was your dad who suggested that title, and it's a great title. So when it came time to write the book, I thought, well, it has to be that title, because it's a little provocative, and it's a little makes you wonder what does that mean?
Yeah. And so I know that Frances was a very just great influence, large influence, and good influence on Chesterton's life. On Gilbert's life, I should say.
Right.
And can you speak about how their marriage was, what their relationship was like, how it worked out? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's go back. When in talking about researching the book, there was very little written. There were, one little chapter in this book, and a little bit here and a little bit there. So I did do 8 to 10 years of research before I actually wrote the book. Just because even when I gave that speech, I look back on that now, and if I listen to that speech, I think, oh my gosh, I learned so much after that speech. I knew so little, even though I knew more than everyone else knew about Frances. It still wasn't very much about her life. But she was a very quiet woman, very shy woman, but also a very humble woman. So she did ask her husband not to talk too much about her in his autobiography, and he respected her wishes. So it was very hidden, but she was published. She was published herself. So cool. Once I found that out, I did put together this other book called How Far Is It to Bethlehem? And this has all her plays and poetry and a couple of essays that she wrote. But, if you look, it's pretty thick. I was able to find quite a bit of her material, and I knew it was too much to put into the biography. So I thought, well, I'll just publish this second book with just her stuff in it. And she's prolific. So she's not as
great.
prolific, obviously, as
Well,
her husband.
yeah. You know who she reminds me of, incidentally, is Saint Joseph. Even though it's kind of reversed, where Saint Joseph is the man in the Holy Family.
Right.
Saint Joseph was very humble. He's not spoken about as much in the Bible, and he's just, you know, very under the radar. But now he's grown, and he has this huge cult following, and he's a phenomenon in the Catholic world. And it's so funny, actually. This is relevant. You can sign up for our Lenten Reflections campaign and receive an email every day with a Chesterton quote and a prayer reflection written by Nancy, right?
I did write most of them, yes.
There you go. And the theme of this Lent for our campaign is Saint Joseph. So you're journeying with Saint Joseph through Lent and then Easter. So I will also put the link in the description to go there, but you can go to our homepage, chesterton.org, and sign up there. And it's a very prayerful experience, and a lot of people like it who go along this journey with us. So apart from that, she does remind me of him, because he's he has this, her spouse is just kind of a giant, literally.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, that's what I want to say.
So true. I mean, I often think of her as standing like in his shadow or behind. If she stood behind him, honestly, you wouldn't see her. Yeah. So, but she was so important to him. And, you know, people said when they got married that Chesterton's mother had been the most important person in his life up until that point. And his mother was very important, and she formed Chesterton into like kind of the intellect and she encouraged him and his brother Cecil to debate at home and all of that kind of thing. And she also had this other factor where she had absolutely no notion of neatness. So she never made him brush his teeth or comb his hair or anything. And that just carried throughout his life, where he just was not a neat person.
Right.
So then when Frances married him, she went on what Chesterton called her Crusade of Neatness, where she wanted him to look neat because probably there was a little bit of reflection on her.
Yeah.
So she would say, you know, Gilbert, comb your hair. And he wrote in this letter one time, he said, I fix my hair and it remains perfect for about 3 minutes, and after which it immediately needs another haircut.
Yep.
So
that sounds like my dad. We have to always make sure his hair is good for the camera.
Right. Yeah, because you're a public figure. You have to worry about things.
But it's usually my mom who does, his wife who does it.
See, there you go. Another good example. So she came up with the cape coat and the slouch hat. And he had his own sword stick, which he always carried. So when he walked through the streets of London, he was a very noticeable figure. People recognized him right away. And
right. He was one of the most famous people alive from where he was. Right. Yeah. People forget that because a lot of people have forgotten Chesterton. So we're trying to bring him back.
That's right.
Yeah. We actually, in this office, because I'm in my dad's office right now, if you're not watching this on YouTube, Dale's office. Somewhere in here is the cane that Chesterton used, the actual cane with the eagle on top.
Yes.
But did he have a separate sword stick?
Yes, he did. And he had quite a few of those. I think he had at least 3 of those canes. That's one of the ones. And he got those in Poland. And I've touched that cane.
Cool.
Yeah. He did have a sword stick. I don't know who has that or where it might be.
Yeah.
But
we have to track it down. We don't know.
He would carry around a large knife also, a very large knife. And he would just, every once in a while, he'd come out and play with it. He even got arrested one time because he was throwing it at a tree. And the policeman said he was defacing the tree. But when they brought him into their office, the chief of police recognized and knew who he was. And he was, oh, we'll let you off, Mr. Chesterton.
Oh, man. That's so funny.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, I understand that there's a number of funny stories involving Chesterton and his wife. Like one time, didn't he leave without one of his shoes? Wasn't that one of the times
he would occasionally go out with slippers on? And there were other times. There was another time where they were sitting on a train. Well, apparently she had helped prepare this speech, and she had the papers. And somehow in the hustle and the bustle, and they got on the train, and somehow the papers weren't. And she was very upset because she
Yeah.
worked so hard to help him be prepared. But he was very calm. Don't worry about it, dear. And he could spontaneously speak at any of his speeches, no matter what the topic was. He did not have to have notes.
Wow.
And sometimes he would take notes out and look at them as if he were looking at his notes. And people afterward would look at what he was looking at, and they were just doodles on a piece
There's
of paper.
doodles, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That's so great.
Yeah.
One time, didn't he he called his wife from a payphone and asked her where he was supposed to be and what he was supposed to be speaking about, or something along those lines, right?
Close. It was a telegram. So
Okay.
he was at, and I think the train stations, I think in those days, all had telegraph offices.
Okay.
So he had gotten on a train, gotten to an exit, got off, and then didn't know where he was supposed to go. So he telegraphed Frances and said, "Am at Market Harborough. Where ought I to be?" And she thought about it, and she thought it's too complicated to tell him where to go. So she telegraphed back and said, "Come home," so that he could start all over again and get on the right train.
Oh man, that's so good. I love that. Oh man, I feel like we would have people nowadays like that. Just it's a lot quicker because of our phone.
You just pick up your phone. Yeah. But you how often do you text and ask somebody, what am I supposed to get at the grocery store or whatever? I mean, yeah. That's
so funny. Well, I mean, it sounds like they had an amazing relationship, an amazing marriage, and and I know that Chesterton really loved Frances. I know that was a major point, right? Is that correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they were utterly dependent on each other. They actually, neither one of them was very healthy. We think of Chesterton as being this big, robust guy who's the picture of health, but he really wasn't. He was sick all the time. He would sprain his ankle. He broke his arm. He had really bad teeth that had to be pulled out, and he had this bad cough, and so sometimes he would get like bronchitis, and then she also had all of these health problems, mostly stemming, I think, from the fact that when she was growing up, one of her legs grew a little bit longer than the other leg, and so she was a little off center, and that eventually caused some health problems for her. And there was talk of maybe there was a thyroid situation or whatever. But at one point, we're in the pandemic right now. Chesterton actually got the Spanish flu and was sick.
Wow.
Yeah. So she didn't get it somehow, but she nursed him through it. And then she would get the flu. One time she got the flu so bad, she got pneumonia, and then she was sick for like 3 months. So, she did have nurses come and take care of herself. And then when he was sick, she would have nurses come. And then there's that huge illness that he had right during World War I, where he was sick from Christmas until Easter. So to think of all of that, taking care of him through that whole thing. Yeah,
wow. And then who died first?
He died first in 1936, and she was actually 5 years older than him. So he died he died at 62. So she was 67 at the time. But then she just grieved and died 2 years later. I don't know, probably mostly of grief, but she did get cancer, and her death certificate said she died of cancer.
Okay. Yeah. That happens a lot of time where your significant other, your spouse, will die, and it's like part of you died. Because they're one hypostatic union, so it kind of makes sense.
The thing about Frances is she was a poet. So I found there's a notebook of her poems from pre-Gilbert. And these were all like, I hope someday to fall in love and find someone, and all those kind of rosy poems. And then she wrote occasional poems throughout her life. But then after he died, she wrote another notebook she started with really sad poetry in it after he died. Yeah.
Well, that sounds like it's just filled with amazing stories. And so I encourage everyone to buy the book. Go to chesterton.org/shop, and you can find it there. Search The Woman Who Is Chesterton. And so moving on, before we talk about Cor Jesu, I wanted to mention the Rosary League, because you started this Rosary League where on Thursdays we pray the Rosary, the Luminous Mysteries live on Facebook and Instagram. and I've participated in that, and so have other members of our staff. How did that come about, and how was that?
Yeah, well, that's a great story too. So if you think about Gilbert and Frances, Gilbert is really like the public figure, and Frances is like the support behind him. And we thought about the Society of Gilbert Keith Chesterton, and we thought, well, that the society is like the public portion of our society, but then there should be like this praying arm that supports the society and, you know, prays for all of its intentions and all of that. So kind of like a Gilbert Frances, the Frances Chesterton Rosary League is like the Frances support of the Gilbert Chesterton.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So it just kind of evolved a few years ago. And what our ideal situation is for groups of people to actually get together and pray the rosary. And so it doesn't take much, you know, where 2 or 3 are gathered. So it could be 2 people in the same household, or, you know, it could be a church group or a prayer group. But what happened was a few years ago, Dale took this pilgrimage to Rome, and he did a little video every day. And he would always say, you know, send us your intentions and we'll pray for you. Well, Adrian, we got hundreds and hundreds of intentions.
Wow.
And I can't tell you, I mean, I started like every day I would read them and pray for those people because we had promised to pray for them.
Right.
You know, by the end, it was taking me like an hour just to read all the names. There were so many names. Yeah. So what we did was we synthesized all of the prayer requests, which are, you know, they're just typical prayer requests, and yet they're specific. You know, there's someone's sick, and someone has a chronic illness, and someone just died, and pray for my son-in-law's marriage, and that, you know, all of those kinds of things that we hear people asking us to pray for. We synthesized all of those into a set of intentions that we read before every decade of the rosary, and then we also decided to use the scriptural rosary because it just gives you just a little bit more. It helps you walk through that, you know, decade kind of like with Mary and with scripture. Where did those, you know, where did those come from? How did we have the rosary, and why does it help us? It helps us meditate on the life of Christ. And so the scriptural rosary helps you focus a little bit more.
That's great. Yeah, I remember when I started participating with you guys by praying it live on Facebook and Instagram. I was a little bit skeptical because praying live over social media, I was hesitant, you know. But then one day I got a text while we were live praying, and it said, you know, this popped up right at the right moment because I really needed to pray, and I really needed to pray with you guys, and that was amazing. I mean, it's anecdotal, but that's what prayer can be.
Exactly.
So I really appreciate you starting that.
Yeah. Well, and then what happened with the being online was not everyone has someone that they can pray with, and not everyone has a group that they can go with. So we thought, well, we'll at least pray together online once a week.
Right. That's good. Well, I would suggest you follow us on Facebook and Instagram and participate with that. And right now you can go to chesterton.org/rosary-mysteries to get the prayers, actually, because we do the form where we read a passage of what mystery you're praying before each of the Hail Marys. So you can go there to get the PDF, and you can pray along with us. So yeah, that's all I have on that. Anything else on that topic before we talk about Cor Jesu?
No, just to say that it's live at 4 p.m. Central every Thursday.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
All right. So last topic I have, you recently came on board as project manager for Cor Jesu, Chesterton Cor Jesu, again, our online school, and I've been in the background trying to help with some tech issues. But how has that guy? I mean, my understanding. My limited understanding is that it's a lot of chaos because it's a big job and it's very difficult. But what do you have to say about everything?
Well, I hope the chaos is all big.
Yeah, chaos in a good way. I should say. Not bad.
Well, there is a technical challenge to having a school online, as everyone knows with this year. I mean, who hasn't been online for school this year? Very few people. Everyone's had to, even if you have a physical school, at some point you might have had to quarantine for some reason, so you had to go online. Mm-hmm. So everyone knows that having a school online, I think, is a challenge.
Yeah.
And the other challenge was that we decided very late in the summer that we were going to do this. Mm-hmm. And so we just, this is where prayer comes in. You just pray that you can do everything you need to do to get this thing off the ground and to help those families, because the families that signed up with this were people who really needed something like this to come along at the right moment.
Right. We should specify that Chesterton Cor Jesu is for students, or for kids who aren't close enough to a physical Chesterton Academy, Chesterton Schools Network School. And so that's why we have the online school. We prefer people meet in person and everything, but a lot of people don't have that ability. So that's what the purpose of Chesterton Cor Jesu is. And so that's, like you were saying, they don't have another option unless they want to go to a public school or something along those lines. So yeah, it's just really amazing that you guys were able to start it up and everything.
Yep. Yeah. So there was a pretty big scramble in the beginning of the year in September. Mm-hmm. to get everything off the ground and everything. But there's some factors that are just, wonderful about Cor Jesu. And one of the factors is our teachers. Yeah. So we have absolutely fantastic teachers. And one of the great benefits of having the Chesterton Schools Network is that you have access to the best teachers. Yeah. So Andrew Youngblood is our headmaster, and he just went out and got the best teachers. And so
that's great.
Our kids are having a great experience online with their teachers. They love their classes, the curriculum. They're always praising.
Yeah, which it makes sense, because Andrew, the headmaster, is also our director of curriculum. So he has a tight grasp and understanding of our curriculum. And we talk about it a couple episodes ago. We have a very good conversation about that. But so I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that it was an awesome episode. I listened to it and it was, yeah. So I think what we should emphasize is it is exactly the same curriculum as any Chesterton Academy, mm-hmm. except that this is all happening online. So we have a series during the week. They have some live classes, some what are called asynchronous classes, which are classes that maybe were previously recorded. There's reading assignments. There might be a video to watch. And so the kids are getting a rigorous education, a classical and that integrated mm-hmm. education that the other Chesterton Academies are providing too. So we hope, we have this vision for every major city mm-hmm. across the US to have a Chesterton Academy. But even like I live in the Chicago area, there is one Chesterton Academy in the Chicago area, but I live, an hour and 15 minutes away from it. So I envision Chicago could have 3 Chesterton Academies, maybe 4 Chesterton Academies. So our vision is big, that we would love to have, more Chesterton Academies all over the place. But I think even there's still rural areas that aren't going to be served. And so I think Chesterton Cor Jesu will always have a place in our Chesterton Schools Network, because there's always going to be kids who live, too far away from another Chesterton Academy.
Yep. We're going to make use of the good things with our technological advancement. And
that's right.
Yeah. Well, anything else you want to say on Cor Jesu? I stress, go to chestertonschoolsnetwork.org/Cor-Jesu, and that's JESU. I've said GESU in the past. I won't say it again, even though I just said it's JESU.
That's right.
So, you can go there to register. You can go there to register your kid. That's what I got there. Woman Who Is Chesterton. Go to our shop, chesterton.org/shop. And again, these are not sponsored, advertisements. This is all society stuff. This is all under the Society of G.K. Chesterton. So we have a lot of stuff for you. You can become a member of our society. You go to chesterton.org/membership. So it's a lot of good things are happening here, I want to say. Wouldn't you agree, Nancy?
I totally agree. Yes. The society is just, there's so much going on. We have all this content. If you're a member, you get special content. We get Gilbert Magazine. It's just,
Yeah.
It's a wonderful organization. And what we're doing is we're trying to promote the spirituality really of the Chestertons. And so we look at them as our example, and we love their joy and their enthusiasm about life and wonder. And that's what
while money does help and becoming a member does help, I mean, prayers help the most. So if you give us your prayers, that would be much appreciated. But yeah, anything else you want to add, Nancy, before we wrap up?
No, I think we had a great time here, Adrian. Thanks. It's so great working with you, and it's great being on the podcast again for old time's sake.
I know, yeah. Well, we'll have to have you again sometime. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you, everyone who's listening. Until next time, help us to make uncommon sense more common.